Do you think a guy building an AR can call himself a gunsmith?
In a word, no.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Guns Magazine Presents the Guns Podcast US, sponsored by Ruger. I'm your host, Brent Wheat, and I'd like to welcome you to one of the world's biggest audio and video gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks about the interesting stuff that makes up the world of shooting. Before we get started, though, here's a quick word from our great sponsor, Ruger.
Looking for a firearm that's rugged, reliable, and built in America? Ruger Firearms has been trusted by shooters for generations, offering everything from hunting rifles to everyday carry handguns. Whether you're on the range, in the field, or protecting your home, Ruger delivers durability and performance you can count on. Discover the full lineup, explore new releases, and see why Ruger continues to set the standard. Visit Ruger.com today.
Well, we've got an interesting topic today as we talk to our official co-host, Roy Huntington. Good morning, Roy.
Hi, buddy. Yeah. I was thinking based on the topic today, I was going to bring a pipe wrench with me to hold
that would
up.
have been a good one. Yeah.
It would have been a good one. So let's explore.
Let's do. And I can guarantee I've noticed the last couple episodes we've been talking about the comments and the emails we get, and, overwhelmingly they're positive, but we always get a few cranky ones as the audience gets larger on YouTube. And I guarantee you this one is going to fire up a few of those kind of comments, because we're going to talk about, are you a gunsmith or gun mechanic if you build ARs and do things like that? So I've got plenty of opinion on this, Roy. I know you do too, but I will defer. The chair calls on His Honor Roy Huntington, and speaking as a guy who he is very much a gunsmith and builds stuff from lumps of steel. Do you think a guy building an AR can call himself a gunsmith?
In a word, no. And there's nothing wrong with that. So,
right.
I mean, I think anything that you're doing with guns like that is a good thing. So keep doing it and learn about it. And if you want to buy a AR-15 parts kit and put it together and learn about that, I think that's wonderful and I support it. I've helped people do it, but that's not gunsmithing.
No, I agree with you. If you're assembling parts, you're a builder, you're an assembler. That doesn't make you a gunsmith. To me, a gunsmith, you've got, like I said with Roy, you got to take a lump of steel and turn it into something. And with the AR, you're not doing that.
Well, I equate it to, like, if you build a house with Legos, are you a contractor? I mean, or in other words, if you build a fort with Lincoln logs, does that mean you're a contractor that you grew up in the frontiers? Because I think usually it's people will start with, hey, I want to build a Glock on an 80% frame. Good, and you should do that, right? Because you'll get new tool skills, you'll understand how the Glock works. Same thing for an AR-15. Now, you're not a gunsmith. I mean, your journey to gunsmith begins when someone brings you their Glock that's broken or malfunctioning, and you learn how to diagnose it, and then you learn how to treat the illness, and then you learn if you have to replace parts or does something need changed, or, and so that's like the baby steps in becoming a gunsmith. So have you noticed that there are no 80% kits for Smith & Wesson revolvers?
That is a great point I never thought of. You're absolutely. Can you imagine what that would be? A bunch of steel. It wouldn't be 80%. It would be a 0% kit.
Well, that's the thing. And I think, like, people who do revolver work are either sort of advanced hobbyists learning gunsmithing skills, or actual gunsmiths. Because what you do is you draw on decades of experience, let's say. I mean, if someone hands me a 6 Smith & Wesson revolver, a 6 Colt revolver, or a 6 Browning high power, or a 1022 that won't work, it doesn't matter what the gun is, you use your gunsmithing skills to be able to diagnose, and then you use your skills to repair, manufacture, replace, and so like I said, there's nothing wrong with doing the 80% frames and all that kind of stuff, and you should. I mean, I've done them, and when I was finished with the first one, I went, that's interesting. I learned some interesting things then, but I think I see people, and we'll see it in the comments here. I've built 35 AR-15s, and I've gunsmithed them, and what I'll say is that if maybe at your skill level, as you've built more and more and more, you'll learn techniques and tricks, and that's got to be just like this, and this, I've found these pins work better than these pins, and
right.
That headspace doesn't feel quite right. I know how to fix that, right? So, okay, you're kind of heading in that direction. But to me, where things skew and the train falls off the tracks is if somebody hands you a Colt Python now and says, hey, it's not timing right. Could you fix it? And it's like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I will say in the same breath, there's a lot of gunsmiths who can't either. I mean, I know gunsmiths that all I do is Smith & Wesson revolver work. Right? Now, they're very talented in what they do, and they can restore a gun, and they can fit a hand, and they can, time them, and they can do all that kind of stuff. But if you give them a Browning over and under Satori 20 gauge that's not shooting, it's like, I don't really know what to do with that. So in my mind, you can do gun work and do gunsmithing on guns, but to me, to hang your shingle out means that you either can handle anything or you have enough experience that you can sort out whatever the problem is. I had something not too long ago. A guy had a semi-automatic Sten gun, right? Which didn't work. Well, I've never worked on a Sten gun. I don't know anything about them whatsoever. So I got it, and I took it apart. I went online. I found some guy told me how to take it apart, and then I started looking at it. And as I began to understand the mechanism, then I realized what was happening. It was a headspace issue. And then I looked at it and I figured out, how do I adjust headspace in this? And I was able to figure that out. And then I went to my lathe and I used my lathe and did a little bit of work and stuff, got it back together. Lo and behold, the Sten gun is alive again, And Excellent. So I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that there's several things to unpack there in what you said. And one of the ones I wanted to hit, and we've talked about this before, is the idea that just because somebody hangs a shingle out as a gunsmith doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified. It's not like being a medical doctor where you at least have to pass some kind of state board someplace, or other careers where you have to meet some kind of mandated standard. But gunsmiths, literally, just if you decide you are a gunsmith, and unfortunately we've all dealt with those, and the term we often use derisively is gun plumber, the guy that first thing he reaches for is a Dremel tool, and I can fix that, even though he's never even seen one.
Bless their hearts. Well,
it's their hearts.
You brought up a good point though about experiences that I have talked to, and actually helped a lot of people who've gone to the 2-year gunsmithing schools. I can't think of Lassen College, I think, is one, and there's a few of them around, and they're getting better now. But until the last 5 to 8 years, if you went to a 2-year gunsmithing school, you learned how to sporterize Mauser 98s. You learned how to re-blue Remington pump shotguns. It was just like as if you were existing in the 50s or 60s. And then they would graduate and go to the cylinder and slide shop and hold up their gunsmithing certificate.
Yeah.
And then guys like Bill would say, well, have you ever fit an extractor on a Colt Woodsman? You know, have you ever taken an OMC 380 backup apart and diagnosed why the firing pins strike is light?
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I think you and I can appreciate this. Is that when I used to do it, you would hire somebody to be an editorial assistant, and then they would come to you with a 4-year college degree, hold it up in English or journalism, or really doesn't matter what it was, right?
Yeah.
And then I would say, okay, well, I want you to edit this article, and we're on this deadline. I need you to cut it by 200 words, select the photo package, crop the pictures, caption them and all that. And they just stare at you,
Yes. Yep.
But then somebody else you interview, because this happened, and he said, well, I don't really have a college degree in this stuff. But he had 8 years of experience as a journalist for a local newspaper.
Yeah.
And he got it completely. I mean, if I said, I need 800 words, 4 good pictures, I need it by 4:00, it was like, okay, to work, right?
He solved a problem. And that's what, whether you're going to a doctor, a gunsmith, or your local gun writer, you want them to solve a problem for you. And, that's a good point that you raised, is that whole idea that just because you've got a certificate, I was a certified Smith & Wesson auto pistol armorer. And I'm long since lapsed. I'm not up to speed, but all that basically did was teach us how to diagnose Smith & Wesson auto pistols and swap out parts. And at no point did I ever consider myself to be a gunsmith whatsoever. I was a technician. I knew how to work on a certain segment of semi-autos, and did for my agency. And but yeah, I keep thinking back to the old quote, a man's got to know his limitations. And I think that's where a lot of the horror stories come from, is, sometimes you run into that guy that maybe he's a great machinist, but he's not that experienced in firearms, and suddenly things go awry, or vice versa, that, somebody knows a lot about guns, but he really doesn't know much about machine work and all that. And I've often wondered, because we've both seen and experienced this, where somebody takes a gun to somebody that can't work on it. And I would feel pretty awful if I held myself out as a gunsmith and I couldn't at least figure out what was going on, and kind of the medical thing first, to do no harm. Gunsmiths don't seem to operate under that theory, at least the bad gunsmiths. So
it's really true. They've made such a bad name for themselves. And you're right, though. I think if you're a parts replacer, it's that whole department armor thing. I knew some of those guys, and they often had a bit of an attitude, because they were, well, I'm the gunsmith for the police department.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're not. You're the parts replacer.
No. Yeah.
I mean, it's like there are auto mechanics who know how to replace the carburetor and change the spark plugs and fix the water pump and do all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Then there are master mechanics, right? Guys who can build an engine from parts and make modifications while they do it, and diagnose issues and make adjustments and manufacture a part that they need. It's like, okay, he's like kind of the master gunsmith guy, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the regular mechanics who work at Walmart. So there's nothing wrong with that, and I can't say that enough. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. And if you buy a Palmetto Armory AR-15 parts kit and put that together and don't blow yourself up, well, then that's good. Now you've taken that first little step. You brought up an interesting point too. I actually have found, if someone really is a machinist, if they actually do, like they've worked in a machine shop or a job shop or something, you can almost always hand them a gun
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is doing this, and I wish it would do this better.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you have to help them take it apart because they've never taken one apart before. But I mean, it's like almost always, just because of the nature of what they do, they can diagnose, they understand the function of the metal parts, and so, give me somebody who's a seasoned machinist and I can teach them how to be a gunsmith kind of pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other way around can be a little bit of a challenge. Interestingly enough, and I see this a lot in our comments, especially when we're talking about things like this, there's a lot of young people who want to learn gunsmithing.
Really?
I know.
That's great.
20-somethings, 35 years old, finally got out of the army after 15 years or something.
Yeah.
And they don't really, it's overwhelming to them. How do I start? What do I do? And it's a big thing. I've been doing it for 50 years. So that's how you end up with the tools that you collect, and you don't start the first day, But I tell these people the best thing you can do is find a shop who's willing to take you on. The problem is there's no shops like that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring up that point that, an apprenticeship was generally how most gunsmiths and the best gunsmiths came about, because you started out being the guy that did the simple stuff, and then as you progressed, they gave you more challenging things, and at some point you were good enough that you either took over that shop or you probably went out on your own and hung out your shingle. And that was kind of the normal trade progression of a lot of things. Used to be that way with, mechanics and things like that. So that's still a viable path. But like you said, Roy, there's just not that many shops out there. And again, I think it's important to point out that just because somebody says gunsmith on premises, you got to be kind of an informed consumer and make sure that just because they call themselves a gunsmith, maybe they just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night and they bought the
I played one on TV.
140, the 140 piece toolkit, and now I are a gunsmith.
So I always have to laugh because you can see that complete gunsmithing toolkit on Amazon for $49.95, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty much got 90% of the things you don't need.
Yeah.
Inside of it. All of it boils down to the bottom line, which is if you're passionate about something, if you want to do it, then you have to acknowledge the fact that you're going to be an apprentice, and then you're going to be a journeyman, and then you're going to be, a master bricklayer, And what I'm finding, though, is with a lot of the younger people with this immediate gratification thing that they're in, it's like they want it today.
Yeah.
So, I want to have this. And in their mind, it's like this gunsmithing place, and there's lathes and milling machines, and there's all kinds of parts, but they have no idea about any of that, or how to do it, or what to do, and there's very little of that around, really. What I'm seeing lately is that there are people are becoming very vertical when it comes to gunsmithing. This
Good
guy
point.
does AR-15s. This guy does Glocks. This guy does Smith & Wesson revolvers. Nobody does Colt revolvers.
Yeah.
Because they're complicated, But I think that's what I wanted to do today, was just tell people, don't be smug and think, oh, well, I am a talented gunsmith, when you're not, because you're going to do yourself a disservice. As you said earlier, you're going to get into trouble because somebody's going to bring you something. And now you have this face that you're hiding behind. And a lot of times people have trouble looking and saying, you know what? I don't think so. That's, beyond me. Lord knows I've done that before. I remember one time a guy I knew had a Perazzi shotgun, and he wanted something. And it's like, if you're not familiar with Perazzi, this is like a $50,000 shotgun, right?
Right.
And something was happening too. I don't remember what it was. And he said, hey, could you look at this and maybe, do? And I just went, nope.
I'll look at it, and that's as far as I'm going.
I'll appreciate it, and thanks for letting me hold it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I think that's and that's another tangent we could get off on is evaluating a gunsmith. I like it when somebody goes, I've never seen that. I'm not exactly sure, but I can find out. That tells me there's somebody that has enough humility that they're not going to just dive in thinking, well, I know this. I'll figure it out as I go. That's what always intrigues me about really guys that are really good mechanics, metal workers, machinists, that kind of thing. They may not know something, but they'll draw on a great depth of experience, and then they'll read up or go on the internet, learn it, and then they'll take it real slow, step by step, again, with that idea of, I don't want to break something before I have to fix something. And when you see a guy or a gal like that, typically a guy, you need to hold those people close to your heart because they're irreplaceable. Their depth of knowledge and their skills that they've, developed, the old thing, they know more, they've forgotten more than I'll ever know. When you find somebody like that has the humility to tell you that I don't necessarily work on that, or I've never seen this, but I'll give it a look. Those are the people that are truly good at what they do, in my book.
Absolutely. I was trying to get a Ruger single action Blackhawk to time correctly the other day, and I was kind of having trouble with it. They're pretty simple, but all of these things are 150-year-old designs, and so they're a lot of times they're simple. There's 8 parts, but it's complicated.
Yeah.
And so I called my buddy Hamilton Bowen, Bowen Classic Arms. I said, Hamilton, I'm really just up against a wall with this thing. How do I get this? And he immediately said, all right, well, look, right below the ledge on the hand at the point of the sear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Take your stone, and I want you to round that about 2 thousandths, and then put that back in and see if it still catches. And if it does, and and it's like, that's the guy. He's a gunsmith. I mean, he just, because I could have asked that question about any number of other things, and he would have given me answers that I didn't know.
Yep.
Yep. I think I encourage everyone to do it, though. If you want to do it, do it. Don't be in a hurry. Be careful if you find someone who you think is going to be a mentor for you. If they're, you can tell the ones you started to talk about, they're a little bit arrogant. They act like know-it-alls. I think look at their workbench, and if it looks like just a pile of crap piled up on their workbench, it's like, maybe he's not your guy. But if the guy you have is like pretty organized and they've got good tools, and as you said, they're quick to say, I really don't know about that, but let's see what we can learn. Well, okay, good. Then that's a guy that you should talk to.
I've been, this is totally unrelated, but it is related. I've been watching on YouTube a channel, and I don't even actually remember the name of it, but it's an older guy, probably your age, Roy, and his son, and they rebuild engines. And he is so knowledgeable, and he's so humble that, again, he'll go like, well, I haven't seen that in 42 years, or, well, I've never seen that, but, other engines did this and repaired this way. And that was what was also very amazing. A lot of these engines, the old engines, the kind of the one-off, rare things, have had really messed up repairs. And so he not only has to diagnose the problem, he has to diagnose the bad repair. And just seeing how he walks through and his thought process on how he figures this stuff out, I'm thinking, I bet that guy could probably do really good on guns if he doesn't already. So, it's just those little things, but yeah.
Yeah. If you either have that mechanical thing, because you're like me, I guess I kind of can fix anything.
Yeah.
I mean, when something breaks around here, even if I have no idea what it is, short of complicated electronics and plumbing, I refuse to deal with plumbing any more than change the drain or something, because that's a black art. I don't care what they say. But But you just sort of sort your way through it, and then logic dictates, well, this should be, and then this should be, and sure enough, there it is. But I know a lot of people don't have that skill. I had a friend of mine. This was a few years ago. He had taken his Ruger GP 100 to a gunsmith. It was just what you were talking about. It was a local gun store that had Gunsmith on what is the
on duty or on premises?
Premises. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And Gunsmith on premises. And so he walked in, handed him his GP 100 and said, "Hey, I would like to have a different sight installed on the back of this." And they said, "Okay." And the gunsmith came out. And this guy, he's like 52. He smokes. He's got a coffee cup in his hand.
Yeah.
Pontificates, wants to tell you all about everything that you don't know about anything. And this is his gunsmith. And I learned later, because my friend went back and looked, and he's the guy we were talking about. Workbench was this huge mess, old rusty gun parts scattered all over the place and everything. So cigarette butts and, coffee stains all over everything. And so this guy, he took his gun and he fit a new rear sight on it. And my friend paid him for it. And then this guy, my friend, is a shooter and a gun guy, but not really well versed in it, kind of. So he brought me his GP 100, and he said, this action, I think there's something wrong with the action. Could you look at it? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. Stop on by. I haven't seen you in a while anyway. So he came by and he handed me the gun. And the first thing that caught my eye, this was hysterical. This guy had pounded like a Novak style rear sight into the rear dovetail that was cut in this factory GP 100, and only it didn't fit. So he took a file and he just kind of filed all around. And then when he was able to finally pound the sight in, you could read in the gap that's between the bottom of the sight and the top strap of the gun, and the dovetail itself, the dovetail base of the sight was actually bent a little bit from pounding in. And I said, good Lord, man, what happened? And he said, oh yeah, I had that sight put in by that guy. That guy that's a gunsmith over there. And I went, oh Lord.
Wow.
I was amazed. But as you say, this guy, gunsmith on premises, and so he said, why, what's wrong? And so I explained it, and he went, oh, can you fix it?
Oh,
and I said, I think so. We'll see what we can do here. And so what I ended up doing was I actually machined a new flat on the top of his, thing. And I found another sight that was oversized, and I was able to machine it down to fit into the new setup that we had.
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was fun to do too, because it was an interesting challenge. And when he saw it afterwards, he went, oh, now I see the difference. Yeah. When your gunsmith pulls out a ball peen hammer, then you need to back away, So yeah, I mean, if you're AR-15 assembler and someone brings you a Smith & Wesson revolver and wants you to install a front sight on it, well, I mean, look at it, and if you can, with confidence, well then great, because that's a new skill. You're going to learn how to do that. It'll make you want to learn more things. If you don't really know how to do it and you find yourself reaching for that 1 pound ball peen hammer, stop.
Yep. Well, you said something I don't ever think about, but I've actually my beloved spouse mentions this quite a bit, and I'm proud of it, but I don't ever think about it. Is the fact, I can fix most anything around the house. As you and I were talking just before we started recording, I had to fix the garage door that was messed up. Got that fixed. Don't know a darn thing about fixing garage doors, but I took it slow. And interesting thing, when I looked at the way it was messed up, I thought, let me reach, and then I thought, no, if you put your hand in there and something goes wrong, you're going to come back with no fingers. And that's part of it too, is slow down, speed racer, and, figure out what can go wrong. And that's what served me well in learning things. And when you talk about, I am by no stretch a gunsmith in any way, shape, or form. You would never catch me under, penalty of perjury saying that I'm a gunsmith, but I've worked on a lot of guns. And we laugh nowadays that on YouTube, there's a video out there for virtually anything and everything in the world, probably including brain surgery. But, I've worked on my double barrels and things like that. I had a double barrel that was not happy, and turns out it was really gunked up inside. And so I followed a video, but the main thing was I have the right tools. That's important. Gunsmith screwdrivers. If you don't have a set of gunsmith screwdrivers before you even start, don't. That's non-negotiable. But then from there, just take it slow, use basic principles, and I can fix most things. I can set sights. I can do all that. But that doesn't make me a gunsmith. And I've built AR-15s. I've changed out triggers. I'm not a gunsmith. And anybody that claims to be, they're full of stuff.
Well, but the key is that the things you can do and the things you can't do.
Yeah.
And I have repaired a lot of things for people that were fixed by people who didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
And didn't have the guts to just say, I don't really know how to do that. I mean, I remember one time a guy, I was at a range actually, and he showed me his front sight was loose of a semi-auto pistol, an M&P, I think. And so the front sight was just loose and he said, well, what could you do? Could you fix that? And I said, well, that's really weird. This is loose like this. So I slipped it out. And I could see where someone had filed on it. And so I think what they did was they filed on it to get it to slide into the dovetail. But one file stroke too much means that it's loosey-goosey now, right?
Yeah.
And then I could see the remains of super glue. It wasn't even Loctite. It was clear super glue.
Yeah.
And so
that
then
works for a minute.
Yeah, because this guy had just bought this gun from somebody. I actually bought the gun from a retired cop. And
that's not surprising.
I know. So he had just squirted super glue all around and wiped it off with a Q-tip or something. And and like you say, after the first half a dozen shots, it broke free, and off you go. Yeah. So wow. You want to know how I fixed that, though? I'm going to tell you a secret gunsmithing tip. Now, if this was a fine firearm, I wouldn't have done it this way. But this is just like a beater M&P, bang away at the range with it. You get a punch, like a little center punch, and you put the slide down and you peen up a little bit on the top of the slide. You could also do it to the bottom of the sight if you want to, but what you're doing, raising just little nubbies up, right? Yep. So that takes up some of that space. And now when you tap it in, it's nice and secure. And I know millions of sights have been fixed that way.
Exactly. Well, a great discussion. And again, I'm sorry if someone has their underoos in a twist, but I would agree with Roy wholeheartedly that just putting guns together doesn't make you a gunsmith. So we're certainly interested in hearing your comments and your thoughts, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of interesting ones on this one. So, and a good point that I hadn't even thought about Roy made is there are apparently a lot of young folks that are interested in doing this. Just remember that you got to take it slow. You got to earn your stripes, and you always got to keep learning. So any additional thoughts on that point?
No, well said. Don't be intimidated by it. I see that with a lot of people. Oh, I don't know where to start. I don't know. I need a lathe. I need a milling machine. No, get a rusty 22 and cold blue it and sand the stock and stain it, and you'll be hooked. And then you'll want to do the next one and the next one and the next one. And pretty soon you'll be as old as I am and have been doing it for a long time.
Exactly. Well, another great episode, another great topic, another great discussion. We're interested in hearing what you've got to say. Leave us a comment if you're watching on YouTube, or hit me up at editor@gunspodcast.us. And of course, we need to acknowledge our great sponsor, Ruger.
Whether you're on the range, in the field, or protecting your home, Ruger delivers durability and performance you can count on. Discover the full lineup, explore new releases, and see why Ruger continues to set the standard. Visit Ruger.com today.
Well, don't forget to like and subscribe the podcast wherever you watch or listen to it. That's really important. And I usually ask you every week, just like a broken record, but it really does. That is really the way you can support what we're doing. So, Roy, thanks for joining us for another great topic. And yet again, I am the Brent Wheat, your host of the Guns Podcast US, brought to you by Guns Magazine and sponsored by Ruger. And as I say every week, now get out there and get shooting.